Hello everyone, and welcome to my Total War Warhammer 2 guide to the lore of vampires. In this video, we're going to be taking a comprehensive look at the lore of vampires and its applications on the battlefield. We will also discuss unique tactics and situational nuances for each spell. Hopefully, after all is said and done, you will be able to take a vampire caster into either multiplayer or campaign and give your opponents the dirty vampire business. On that note, guys, let's jump right into this guide and get spooky. The first stop in today's journey will be at the good old macabre kebab shop with Vanhel's Danse Macabre. At 4 winds of magic with only a 28-second cooldown, the spell is an absolute steal. On top of that, you can also overcast it to give it an AoE radius, which is a very good force multiplier with your infantry as well as your mobile cav units. The spell itself provides a recipient with 26 melee attack, which honestly, if that was all the spell did for 4 winds of magic, it would probably be fine and people would probably still use it. But on top of that, it provides 24% speed, therefore allowing your aggressive units like Terrorgeists and Blood Knights and Vargulfs to really get in there and alpha strike, and then from there to get away. On top of that, if you have your evil cackling vampire lords, which are getting chased by like King Lewin or Karl Franz, or let's say there's some Pegasus Knights or some other threat that's really coming for that booty, the Vanhels is going to give them that 24% speed, which will certainly help them escape. The vampire counts at their core are really an aggressive faction, which relies heavily on monstrous alpha strikes in tandem with their withering attrition. So you have this big horde of zombies and Graveguard and troops like that in the front line, but really your value is going to be coming from Vargeists and Blood Knights and Terrorgeists and these things that are really going to be killing enemy lords and characters and cav units, and in my opinion, that's really where you win the battle. Granted, you do have things like Mortis Engine if you want to go very heavily into attrition play, but for the most part, I think their monsters and some of the big boys are really what do the heavy lifting. As such, being able to speed up your predators while also increasing their chance to hit and then escape is insane, because that's really kind of the name of the game with Terrorgeists and Vargeists and even with Blood Knights, which are essentially your shock cav, is you want to get in there, do as much damage as possible, and then, oftentimes get out. There are going to be circumstances in which you want to stay and fight when you have a really heavy advantage, but a lot of times your opponent's going to have their own anti-large threats that can deal with your Terrorgeists or deal with your monsters. So you want to get in, take advantage of the fact that you're flying and you're fast and you have high mass, and then get out. That's why this spell is so good. It gives a melee attack, it also gives the speed to escape, and yeah, just synergizes really well. So on that note, guys, let's go ahead and talk about some recommended tactics and strategies with the Vanhel's Danse Kebab. So the first one is going to be with Blood Knights. Now, Blood Knights are really going to benefit from the extra speed as well as melee attack, especially if you team them up with another group of Blood Knights as well as the Dire Pack. So if you have a couple Blood Knights and some Hounds with them, you can get in there, give them the speed. That's going to put them up to like 90 or not 90 feet. I think it'll put them up to like 85, 90 speed, give or take, which is really fast for like a heavy cav unit. If you look at like Reichsguard and troops like that, or a lot of the Bretonnian heavy knights, are between 66 and 76 speed. So having something that's, arguably more powerful than them can be healed with Invocation of Nehek, and also is going to be getting that juicy melee attack buff. So you can run circles around them. You can pick your engagements. You can run your Hounds up and around the back of them, because Hounds with Vanhels are going to be so damn fast. So you can get up and around enemy cav. You can come in, attack them in the back with the Hounds, and then just hammer them with the Blood Knights. So it gives you so many micro options. Vanhels with the Blood Knights and the Dire Pack or Hounds, and it's just so damn good. So if you have a couple cav units, you're looking to get in and get some shock damage. Even if you want to do a frontline charge, you pop it on them, you run into the front line, you hammer them, you pull back with the speed buff. It is very good and tasty. On top of that, overcasting it on double Terrorgeist can be very effective as well, because again, if you overcast it, it's AoE, and the Terrorgeist can fly in. Their melee attack is one of their weak points, really. I think it's like 34. They really compensate with their bonus first large, but let's say you're attacking like a Footlord or something, and you don't have your bonus first large. Using this spell is going to make you a little bit more efficient at actually hitting that target, and yeah, it just gives you extra punch and extra escapability, which is the name of the game with Terrorgeist. That's how you use them. On top of that, you can use it to save, lords that are being targeted. So if you have a Necromancer or some other character or anything really that's being sniped and you don't have quite enough speed to get away. So let's say, for example, your opponent has a flying unit that has 115, 110 speed, or 120. It might be a Flamespire Phoenix. And it's chasing down your Vampire Lord who has like 100 speed, 110. Can't quite remember what the Hellsteed has, but you can use Vanhels on him to help him get away, and that's going to buy you the much needed time to maybe survive when other areas of the battle, and from there, maybe just get to a safe position. Who knows? And last but not least, if you are using a grindy infantry build, so you could be using Stearnsman or Graveguard or anything in the front line, really, all those things are going to benefit from melee attack. So you can just buff the front line. Yes, the speed is going to be a bit of a wash, but even if you just want to use it as a single target ability, I would highly recommend it using it on the Stearnsman. Stearnsman are already a bit of a lawnmower unit. I mean, they're not known for their high DPS, but they have a bonus versus infantry. They're very durable, and that's really going to help them win that fight that much faster. So that's pretty much it as far as Vanhel's Danse Kebab. So on that note, guys, hopefully you enjoyed that analysis, and we're going to be moving on to Invocation of Nehek. So in my humble opinion, I think that Invocation of Nehek might be one of the best spells in the game, if not the best spell. It is just so damn powerful. There's been countless players. I've actually seen a bit of a movement, like No Nehek November or something. I think was one of the more recent ones I saw where, people were trying to win games with vampire counts without Invocation of Nehek, and it was extremely hard. I mean, it changes the whole dynamic of the faction, and I think they're very heavily reliant on it, to be honest. Anyways, the spell works as a single target ability or an AoE spell if you overcast it. Now, not only does this heal your units like Earthblood and Regrowth, but it also resurrects them. So, for example, you've lost a couple Blood Knights.
Surprise, motherfucker.
No problem. They're going to be coming back with Invocation of Nehek. And how about that horrible Miss Micro? So let's say you had a Terrorgeist, you fly him into gunfire, and any other faction, right, without healing. You fly in, you screw up like that, you're probably going to lose the game. With the Vampire counts, nope, Invocation of Nehek coming in with the Steel Chair. That Terrorgeist is going to get healed up most likely. I mean, yes, there's healing caps, but for the most part, it is very, very damn powerful. So Invocation of Nehek is a spell you want to bring in every single matchup. It's probably one of the first spells you want to get in campaign because it's super good in campaign as well. So as mentioned before, the vampire counts are a grindy faction and they don't have ranged tools. So oftentimes you are going to be taking a bit of a pounding, but with Invocation of Nehek, you essentially want to respond to your opponent's assault. And if done correctly, generally you can outlast them. So here are some tips about Invocation of Nehek that I would definitely recommend for advanced players and beginners alike. So firstly, you want to assess your opponent's, angle of attack or where they're really going to be putting their heavy punch. So for example, if you see a bunch of Demogryph Knights on your flanks with a warrior priest and Karl Franz just sitting there with his hammer looking all foaming in the mouth, just all pissed off, you probably can expect that you're probably going to need to allocate infantry and skeleton spearmen, blood knights, other things to deal with that. But really, you're just going to kind of prioritize that area for your Invocations of Nehek. So in those grindy fights, it's really going to save you from being alpha striked. And from there, you heal up your troops, counterpunch, do your thing. And the next tip is, in my opinion, by far the most important element of using Invocation of Nehek. So when you're using this spell, like I said, it can be single target if you just cast the basic form of it. You're pretty much always going to be casting the overcast. And when you're doing this, you want to maximize the amount of healing because you could have your entire army stacked in a single tiny little blob. And the amount of healing you're going to get is going to be ludicrously powerful. It is going to be insane and game changing. Oftentimes, I've seen people blob up single entities or other units like that. And the balance of power will go from them losing to them being in like an advantageous state. It is so damn good. So essentially the tip is, if you're going to be using it, try and maximize the amount of healing you're getting. So for example, if you have a Vargeist over here and a Terrorgeist over here, you have a Lord, you have the Sternsman, try and, before you cast a spell, if you can, of course, there's going to be tactical necessities. You can't always do this, but if you can, always make an effort to get those units together, especially if they're single entities. That's where you really, really get your value. If you have like two Vargeists and a Terrorgeist there getting healed up, it's just going to substantially change the dynamic of the game, make your force that much stronger. So again, just pack up your forces when you're using this. Not too much to the point where like your opponent can just butter your bread with like a huge Vortex spell or like a Flaming Skull to kill all of your chaff units. But if you have single entities, that's really where you want to focus. Get them together, get that heal. And really that's one of the reasons why the vampire counts historically have been a very, very strong faction. So the next thing on that same note is be aware of healing caps. It's really easy to waste Winds of Magic on capped units. So there's a little bit of a bar. Well, it's like a tiny little like grayish bar, but if you look at your unit's health bar, you're going to see a bar as the battle progresses start to kind of creep back towards their natural health. And once you see it capped or it kind of meets the health bar itself, that's when you know you've reached your healing cap. So be very, try and be aware of this. And if you see your units are healing capped in a big blob, maybe don't cast it, do an overcast, just do a single target to save the Winds of Magic and just kind of target a unit that may really need it. I can't tell you how many times I've done this where it's a vampire count game, it's late game, I have Winds of Magic for other things. I could be using Vanhel's Danse Macabre, I could be using Raised Dead, but instead I overcast and I might hit like one unit that needs it, but there's still a ton of units at their healing cap and it doesn't, it's not efficient. You're really going to be losing out on the Winds of Magic. And this can happen very easily because the vampire counts have so many different ways to heal. You have the Mortis engines, you have other healing tools, and yeah, you really need to look out for that. And last but not least, the last tip is going to be a campaign special. So if you are in campaign, you're playing the vampire counts, let's say you had a super hard battle against the Empire, right? It just decimated both your armies, but you survived, right? So if you're at the end of the battle, make sure to actually before you end the battle, just don't end the battle, just use the remainder of your Winds of Magic to heal up all of the characters that took damage over the course of that battle. So that way, when you go back into the campaign map, those characters are going to be nice and tasty. They're going to be topped off. Therefore, if you get attacked right away by another army, at least you're going to be a little bit healed up. So what you do is you just grab your entire force after you defeat your opponent and have chased off whatever you want. And maybe they still have something on the battlefield, hopefully. You gather up your force, you get that big juicy overcasted Invocation, you heal up your troops, and you're really going to, be quite happy about that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for Invocation of Nehek. It's a great spell, and next we're going to be moving on to another very powerful vampire spell. Well, guys, it looks like the Lore of Vampires does indeed have two of the most powerful spells in the game. I mean, arguably, you could probably say Invocation of Nehek and Raise Dead are probably like top 2, top 3 best spells in the game, somewhere in the ballpark of the top 5 at the very least. So anyways, this spell is an absolute breadwinner and a hotly contested balance topic. Obviously, it's been a long thing. Balances have been changed. In the early days, remember when zombies and skeletons and all those summons didn't disappear? They would just get like just massive amounts of like free skeletons and zombies, and you actually had to like fight through those things. Thankfully, they have been slightly nerfed and they do disappear over time, which I think is a very, very good warranted nerf because it was pretty insane. So for 3 wins of magic, you can summon 7,500 HP worth of fear-causing units, tar-pitting terrors in the night. Yeah, zombies like, damage output, but that is not their purpose. You can use these guys to block flanking charges, tar pit, and force enemy cab units to die a horrible slow death, assault the enemy backline, or immediately take the leadership of nearby units with a rear summon. So on that note, let's break it down. So firstly, and I think one of the biggest strengths of Raise Dead, more so for Vampire Coast, is plugging holes in your formation. So with the Vampire counts, you don't really have a sensitive back line to protect, but with the Vampire Coast, for example, you could just lapse and totally forget about part of your army, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's someone coming, let me use Ross Moondial or the Drowned Dead to summon troops here. So yes, it's really good for plugging holes in your formation. So if you have a big gun line, you see some troops kind of slipping through, or some cab units or some hounds have found their way into your back line, you can use the Ross Moondial or the Drowned Dead to summon there and really stop those guys up. And I think that's one of the biggest strengths for the Vampire Coast. But for the Vampire Counts, it kind of has a similar purpose, right? Because one of the more efficient ways to kill undead units is to attack them in the back. Just get in there, rear charge them, crumble their leadership, because again, they're going to crumble instead of run. So it's really efficient to attack them in the back. As such, you can use it to prevent flanking. So if there's Knights of the Blazing Sun or Demogryph Knights with someone coming to hammer your formation, just summon some zombies. Who cares? It's going to take them a year to kill the zombies. So they could potentially tar pit them if you get the summon right on top of it, and just use it to kind of defend your flanks, plug the holes in your formation, and just get down and dirty. So the next thing is going to be summoned behind enemy units to punish their leadership. So whenever a unit is attacked from behind, it's immediately going to suffer a penalty, I believe, of 14 or 15 leadership, which is huge, right? So lower tier infantry units have like 40 to 50 leadership, higher tier ones between 60 and 80, depending on the unit. And it can be higher, of course. But so being able to immediately, aside from the fighting and the magic and the other variables that are happening to them, their flanks not being secured, their flanks being secured, whatever it may be, they're going to take an immediate punishing penalty just from, 3 wins of magic, which, why do you even need the Lore of Death leadership punishment? Just summon on top of units, and it's going to punish their leadership from being attacked from behind. The zombies also cause fear, so that's another multiplayer, but granted most of the undead units on the Vampire Coast roster cause fear anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. But being able to summon behind units is very, very powerful, and they're also going to be taking extra damage because, again, when you attack a unit from behind, it changes things, so that's one of the best uses of that ability as well. Next, you can summon in the back line. So if somebody's using relatively short-range guns and crossbows, and especially if you're playing newer players who haven't, spread their missiles out, obviously you can see in higher level play, people usually, split their missiles into a big staggered formation so they can crossfire one another. But you can summon the zombies and just have them start chasing. And over the course of a battle, you can easily summon a couple of groups of zombies in the back line to just chase different missile units. And it just kind of puts some pressure on your opponent, and it's going to waste ammunition. It's going to force them to allocate resources to deal with it, or to have to run and not shoot. So summoning zombies in the backline to stop missiles is very, very solid. The next, and I think one of the biggest things, is going to be tar-pitting enemy cav charges. So if somebody comes in with a cav charge, they get a decent charge, right? You can either use it to block them, which is a little bit trickier to do because you have to have like perfect timing. So what I would recommend is sometimes, depending on the circumstances, let them get that charge, let them tickle the pickle a little bit. Then when they come in there, you drop the zombie summon behind them, like on top and behind them. So like half the cav units are trapped in the zombies and they're pinned in, and that pretty much is going to guarantee their death. They're then going to have to pull back through, and I've seen countless Reichsguard, Demogryph Knights, units that are very expensive, coming in, thinking they're hyped, thinking they're going to get the business done, and they just get tar-pitted by zombies and then killed by the other Vampire Counts troops, whether it be Terrorgeist or Blood Knights. It is devastating, and this is one of the best ways to use the Vampire Counts. And this is even more effective if you have like a flying Vampire Lord. So if you have like Manfred on a steed up in the skies, or a zombie dragon, you can fly over and drop zombies on top of the cab units, or you can fly over their artillery pieces. And that's one of the biggest things. That's actually the next point. So you can shut down enemy artillery with flying casters. You fly over a warp lightning cannon, you drop zombies. The rats aren't going to want to shoot their artillery pieces. Some more durable factions like dwarves can endure this, but a lot of low leadership factions, or even just like state troop factions like Empire, for example, is really going to have trouble if you summon zombies or skeletons on top of artillery pieces. And artillery is very good against Vampire Counts monsters and beasts and mortis engines, so that's very, very crucial. And last but not least, you can block rear charges and flanks. Like I said, it's a little bit different than the tar pitting, but you have to have some like matrix micro with this one. You have to have really good timing to get the summon in front of the cav at the right time. But even still, if your opponent is a very high level player, has good reaction times, they can pull back before. I highly recommend going with the tar pit strategy. Not too bad. I think it's pretty good. Raise Dead's a really good ability. Obviously, summons in general, Cygor summons, Manticores are some of the best abilities in the game, but Raised Dead is the OG. It's dirt cheap, and I think it's one of the best spells in the game. On that note, let's move on to the next spell and take a gaze at it. So the Gaze of Nagash in the early days of Total War Warhammer was an insane sniping ability. I remember like right when I started doing YouTube, I had like countless games on my channel where you would actually have to like hide lords and characters and trees, and that was like a valid strategy against vampire counts. It was like, just hide from the Spirit Leeches, hide from the Gaze of Nagash. It's going to one-shot your, or not one-shot, but multi-shot your dwarf lords and characters like that. And it was brutal in the early days. However, after countless nerfs, it is essentially kind of like a run-of-the-mill overcasted snipe spell. In fairness, the biggest issue with the spell is it has an 8 Winds of Magic cost compared to something like Vindictive Glare, which only costs 5. And Vindictive Glare is like a meta-defining ability right now. People are using it to snipe characters. I don't care if you're armored, whatever. Vindictive Glare is just so much better. Granted, the goblins deserve that because vampires have so many other good spells, so it makes sense that this one's a little bit more overcosted. And Gaze of Nagash, on the tooltip at least, articulates that it's a little bit better against armor than perhaps Vindictive Glare. I don't know why Vindictive Glare is a bit of a tongue twister for me today, but anyways, it does seem to disappoint a little bit, but on top of that, the spell has to compete with Invocation of Nehek and Raised Dead in terms of Winds of Magic, and really, you're going to be using those spells in multiplayer, just kind of spamming them. If you do use a Vindictive Glare, or excuse me, the Gaze of Nagash, same thing, goddammit. If you use the Gaze of Nagash, you're going to be taking away from the amount of Raised Deads and healing you're going to get. I really think that the vampire counts benefit heavily from the healing in the Raised Dead, more so than they would getting a little bit of poking damage on a character. And the Vindictive Glare type abilities and the I guess we'll just call them glares seem to be a little bit more effective when you do have some missile follow-up to kind of punch. So essentially, in multiplayer, it's okay. It's like a mediocre spell. I think that if you mix it with like a Spirit Leech and Manfred, who of course has copious Winds of Magic with the with this Cursed Blade or whatever the hell, what is that thing called? Like the Blade of Manfred or something? I just can't remember off the top of my head. It's been a while. It's been a while. Maybe I'll like throw that in there. We'll see. But yeah, if you mix it in with Manfred, do a bit of a sniping build, it can be okay. But I don't think it's ever going to be optimal or super competitive, in my opinion. Now in campaign, I do think this spell is quite a bit better because, of course, the mouth-breathing AI is just going to run in. They're going to take it like absolute champs, and they're not going to make substantial efforts to GQ out. Whereas in competitive multiplayer, most people are going to be able to kind of zigzag, sort of back and forth, and it's already a bit of a tough life for missile attacks as is. I mean, they do have some tracking capabilities, but it seems like Gaze of Nagash just isn't super accurate compared to some of the other ones. But again, in the campaign, it's going to be okay. If you have like Manfred up on a flying steed, you could spam Spirit Leeches and the Gaze of Nagash just on the AI lords, and you're going to be able to kill them relatively easy. So in campaign, it's okay. On top of that, you have tons of abilities that are going to augment your Winds of Magic. You're going to have items. You're going to have Lord traits, all kinds of stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's more of a campaign spell. In multiplayer, it's casual, I think, at best, but it's certainly in campaign, it has its place. So that's going to be it for Gaze of Nagash. As far as tips, again, maybe pair it with Spirit Leech. I think that's going to be one of the better ways to use it, just to more effectively snipe. You could potentially Spirit Leech, Gaze of Nagash, follow up with double Terrorgeist breath attacks, and maybe, one-shot a caster or do a ton of damage to a Lord. I think that could be okay. So now we're on to the next spell, which is going to be a curse. A curse of years, perhaps. We'll see you guys there. Ah, yes, the good old Curse of Years, a quintessential Palpatine spell. I'm too weak, Anakin. I'm shriveled and old.
I'm too weak. Oh, don't kill me, please.
But essentially, I think Curse of Years is a hidden gem, in my opinion, and extremely underrated. It's relatively expensive at 11 Winds of Magic, but depending on the matchup, this spell can do wonders. Especially it's a spell that is like an offensive version of the Danse Kebab, lowering the speed of enemy units by 24% and melee attack by 26%. And more importantly, and the best thing about this ability is it adds 15 seconds to their abilities and spells. So much like Arcane and Forging, this can absolutely dumpster the hopes and dreams of Orc and Greenskin players all around the world by preventing the initial wall. So you cast it on the Greenskin Lord before the fighting starts, which is going to be very easy. Vampire counts have, fast flying casters. You can put them on horseback or their hell steeds. And the Greenskins, yes, they can effigy you, but for the most part, if you play it carefully, you're going to be able to get it off. So from there, they're not going to be able to use the Wa until their Lord gets in combat for 15 seconds. So it's very good like Arcane and Forging, but it also doesn't do direct damage, but it has utility elsewhere. So for example, if you bring it against the Greenskins, you can also use it to kind of turn the tide of different fights. So the spell is AoE, you don't need to overcast it, so it just has a natural AoE base. Therefore, it can be quite good in frontline engagements, allowing your Graveguard and other troops to be, a little bit more durable. So it's already very tough to kill Vampire Count's troops, especially with a Mortis engine and, just perpetual healings with Invocation of Nehek. But, adding and lowering their melee attack is going to be very good. And if you're trying to catch something, so let's say they have the Baconator or any other Lord you're trying to hunt down, it also does lower the speed by 24%. So that's going to make it a little bit more efficient to kind of hunt characters with your Terrorgeists. And yeah, that's really what makes or breaks the game with vampire counts often is, are you able to goon their characters or their lords or really get those high value units? Maybe you're hunting down some Demogryph Knights. You can use the Danse Kebab on your own character. So Vanhel's on your guy to make him faster and better melee attack. And then you can follow up with Curse of Years.
I'll get you, bitch.
to lower their melee attack and make them slower, guaranteeing you're going to catch that high value target. So Curse of Years definitely has a pretty good synergy. And even if you just want to shut down a particular spell, so you're about to go in for an Alpha Strike, you're looking at your opponent's army, you're not going to go for the big charge because you know they have a ton of buffs, but you use Curse of Years, it's going to add 15 seconds to their really powerful game-changing abilities like their regrowth, and then you go in for the snipe, and it's really going to be incredibly solid. So it's a bit of a technical, tough to land ability, a little bit expensive on Winds of Magic, so if you use it in a sloppy way, it's really going to be punishing for you and take away from your Invocations of Nehek and Raise Dead. But if you have good timing with Curse of Years, it can be a very, very good ability. So that's it for the Curse of Years. And now we're going to be talking about our last spell here, which is going to be one of our favorite meme spells. Definitely a very powerful campaign spell. It's going to be the Winds of Death.
Do it.
Alright guys, so Winds of Death is your quintessential campaign spell with limited applications in multiplayer. For 20 Winds of Magic and 27 Overcasted, you get a devastating wind spell. And don't get me wrong, this spell hits like an absolute truck. However, the cast time is quite long, and if your opponent isn't a potato, it's going to be extremely hard to get value from the spell. In campaign, however, the AI will gladly bend over and take this spell like an absolute champ, making it a decent spell for any vampire campaigner. In summary, in multiplayer, it is a very all-in spell, which can win you games. If you're going to try it, I would recommend throwing in a distraction card effect, so get something big and scary, your Terrorgeist, your Vargulf, or maybe put your Lord in a bit of a dangerous situation, right? So from there, your opponent's going to just see red. They're going to be like, free kill, win the game instantly, and they might, kind of forsake something else. They might not look at their front line or their back line of archers lined up, or their iron breakers that are just waiting there. And from there, you might be able to get some pretty good value. So I think just kind of a feign, throwing a distraction out there is going to be the best way to make it work in multiplayer. As far as campaign goes, I mean, you don't really need to worry. The AI isn't really going to be proficient at dodging it. They're just going to take it, like I said. In campaign, it's a really good spell. I mean, countless. I played a couple, vampire account campaigns. I haven't really finished them, but for the most part, like, the AI is going to engage you in a straight line, or they're just going to be sitting defensively, and you're going to be able to get this, especially like in siege battles when they're blobbed at the gate. It is just very, very good in campaign. In multiplayer, it's more of a gimmick. Granted, it still can win you games, and I would recommend, if you want to go all in and you don't really care about, your record on ladder, I suppose, go in there, try it out. And also, I would recommend using Manfred von Karstein. Make sure he does have his blade that's going to allow him to get extra Winds of Magic, and from there, it's not going to be as bad. It's very much an all-in spell. If you use it and you succeed, you're probably going to win. If you use it and you miss, or it just gets a little bit of it just gets the tip in there, you're probably going to lose the game because you won't have enough for Invocations and Raise Dead on a regular basis. In summary, it's very much a Ricky Bobby spell. You're either first or you're last.
Always remember, if you ain't first, you're last.
In my opinion. So, that's kind of the way it goes. Well, folks, that's all we got for now. Now sally forth and conquer the realms of the living. Also, please let me know what lore you'd like to see in the comment section below. And if you also have any questions regarding any of these spells and additional usage or comments, concerns, questions, you list it below and I'll do my best to answer whenever my GIMP hand will permit me. So, all right, guys, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.